Hi, everyone, and welcome to Demo Boost Demolog podcast. This is where we talk about all things demos and the incredible teams behind them. Whether it's mastering demos, empowering pre-sales, or building strong sales teams, we'll cover it all. I'm Anna, your host, and the co-founder of Demo Boost, the all-in-one demo automation platform. For today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Chris White, the author of the 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers and founder of Demo Doctor. With over 30 years of experience in technical sales and consulting, Chris has witnessed firsthand the critical role sales demos play in closing deals. So, Chris, in your work, you focus on elevating sales engineers' performance by emphasizing the importance of collaboration and understanding of consumer needs, and streamlining demo preparation. So, welcome to our podcast. Very awesome to have you here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Anna. So thank you for inviting me.
Today, we're going to be talking about the 6 habits in the era of the new tech, including the AI and demo automation. Shall we dive in?
Please.
So, Chris, your book, The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineer, has made quite a significant impact in this pre-sales community. Could you start by summarizing the key concept of the 6 habits and how they contribute to the success of sales engineers?
Of course. And I'm glad you used the word concepts, because a lot of people ask me to talk about or introduce the 6 habits, but I think it's better to just take a half a step back. The first core concept, and I suspect you can appreciate this, is the notion that as sales engineers, in spite of the fact that many of us come from a technical background, and when we enter this profession, many of us don't necessarily think of ourselves as sales professionals. The reality is that we are in sales, and we need to come to peace with the fact that our primary role is not technical, that our primary role is selling and being part of the sales team and the go-to-market team. So that's really the first core concept, is that we are in sales. Now, once we come to peace with the fact that we're in sales, the first habit that I talked about, but really it's the first core concept, is that sales is a team sport. We are in this together. And this is particularly important in collaborating with, and you used the word collaboration a moment ago, and collaborating with our sales counterparts. Normally we're paired with account executives, and we tend to think differently. We tend to approach engagements and clients differently. So we need to learn how to communicate and collaborate. So that's another core concept. Another core concept is learning how to engage in effective discovery. I think many of us pride ourselves in being experts. We pride ourselves in being good in front of an audience, delivering the message. What many of us don't understand, particularly early on, is that arguably one of the most important skills is the ability to ask engaging, effective questions. So we talk a lot about discovery. So there's 3 concepts for you. I'll share just a couple more. Another core concept is that success in the context of a meeting with a customer, whether it's a demo, a POC, a presentation, what have you, is as much about what happens before the meeting as it is what happens during the meeting. So what do we mean by that? We talk a lot about, in the book, I talk a lot about the importance of preparing with the right focus, which is to say the customer, the challenge, what they're trying to achieve, as opposed to our product, and then practicing and aligning with sales. So that's another key element, is being effective in our preparation and efficient for meetings. And then the last one I'll share is this idea of the customer-facing meeting. Because many of us come from a technical background, it's easy for us to think of a conversation with a customer maybe the way we would have a conversation with some of our colleagues. But I think it's important for us to understand that there's a difference between what I call backstage conversations and on-stage conversations. And whenever we're in front of a customer, we are on stage. And there are certain things that we should say, show, and do, and avoid saying, showing, and doing in order to achieve the objective of the meeting. So those are some of the core, as you asked, those are some of the core concepts that I covered in the context of those 6 habits.
And you use the word "we" a lot, talking about solution engineers, but who did you have in mind writing these books? Were they specifically aimed at sales engineers, or can those concepts be stretched and valuable for anyone in the broader B2B sales process?
It's really a great question, and I'm glad you asked. It's interesting, and I know we're going to talk briefly about this at some point. We have this 6 habits sort of certified community, and we have these weekly masterminds, and there's always we always pick a topic, and there was a topic, I want to say, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and the topic of that particular mastermind was, if you could go back to your younger self on the first day as a sales engineer, what would you tell yourself? And my colleague Bill, who helps run the community, he sort of facilitated the conversation. So, and it's somewhat unlike me, but literally for almost the entire conversation, I just sort of sat back and listened and observed and reflected. And near the end of the meeting, they asked me, they finally came to me and they said, well, Chris, what would you go back and tell yourself on your first day as a sales engineer? And I said, you know what? I think that's the book that I wrote. I think the book that I wrote was actually me telling myself back when I first started this profession, these are all the things that you need to know. So that's a long-winded way of answering your question, which is, without a doubt, it was written for the sales engineer and with the sales engineer in mind. That being said, I've had countless people tell me, honestly, Chris, like there are some things that are very specific to a sales engineer, but easily 80% of what you talk about is applicable to anyone in a customer-facing role, not just a sales role. Anyone in a customer-facing role that's involved in either acquiring, protecting, or retaining revenue. Because it's all about understanding the customer. It's all about preparing with a focus on what they care about most. It's all about presenting in a certain way that's both relevant and inspiring and engaging. So it has much broader applicability than just the sales engineer.
Very good. We clarified that. So definitely recommending it to everybody out there. In my work at DemoBoost, I've recently been talking to many people who are just about to break into the profession of pre-sales consultant. Could you, and you mentioned that that it's actually about the advice that you would give yourself on day one of your work in this profession. So how do you think this knowledge can further their career in the future?
Yeah. Another important question. And, you know, Anna, as I reflect on what you're asking, I think so many of us trying to break into this profession, we think that it's our technical skills and or our technical knowledge, our technical expertise and experience, and or our ability to communicate, our ability to demonstrate. As I like to say, I thought I was going to be brilliant in this role because I could move a mouse and talk at the same time, right? I mean, that's what I thought there was to it. I think it's very easy to overlook some of the nuanced soft skills, if I can use that term, that really make the difference from my vantage point between a sales engineer, or let me even say it this way, someone who demonstrates software for a living and a true professional sales engineer. And what are some of those things? And we've talked about it a little bit. It's understanding some of the nuances between sales and pre-sales, and some of the the challenges that just inherently exist between an account executive, for example, and a sales engineer. It's understanding that before we show up and show or demonstrate anything, we need to take a half a step back and ask the customer some questions and do so in a way that's meaningful and relevant to them. It's understanding that every opportunity, every account, every client, every situation is different. And so we need to be prepared to change our approach, customize, be flexible. It's not about us, it's about our customer. It's about what's going to be meaningful to them. These are nuances that I think many people sort of call soft skills. To me, this is the difference between what someone can read in a resume and what people actually experience when they engage with an individual. Does that resonate with you, Anna?
100%. And next question based on that would be, so if I am trying to break into this career, you're coming up with a list of awesome skills or concepts to master. Is there an order of priority to focus on them, or do I do everything at the same time?
It's a tough question, actually, because I think the first answer, the first thought that comes to mind is yes, there's a priority, only because I think there's a certain sequence, if you will. And one of the first things I mentioned is coming to peace with this idea that we are in sales. We literally need, and I'm a perfect example of that. When I first got into this profession, I did not think of myself as a sales professional. In fact, in my mind, sales was beneath me. I'm an engineer. I'm an enterprise architect. Don't group me in with those people over there. They're the sales, right? I literally had to come to peace with the fact that I'm in sales. And then once I came to peace with that, then I had to accept that, okay, well, now this is a partnership. And once I became to more peace with the partnership, and I started getting particularly enthusiastic about getting in there and showing and demonstrating, I realized that I was doing so without getting context first. Frankly, I had a big ego, and I thought, well, I'm good enough. Just drop me in front of anybody, and I'll just do my thing. Until I realized that, boy, I was putting myself into a pretty difficult situation. So I had to learn how to do discovery. But then I learned that I was doing discovery. I was gathering all this information, and then I was spending countless hours, if not days, preparing material for a demo that nobody ever saw, because I was over engineering, right? I was building way more than I needed to. So I learned that I had to prepare and practice in the right manner. And then finally, I learned the hard way, in more cases than not, that when you are in front of a customer giving a presentation, giving a demonstration, there are very specific ways in which you need to present the solution. There are ways in which you need to answer questions. You need to read the room, and it's not just a one-way conversation. It's really a facilitation of a conversation. So to answer your question, I tell people, if I were to prioritize, I might prioritize in the order of the habits, because it really follows a process and becomes a repeatable process. That being said, and it's an interesting question for this reason. One of the things that I do at the end of many of my workshops is I'll take a poll at the end of the workshop and ask the group, which do you think is the most important of the 6 habits? Do you know I get a different answer every time? There's one or two that usually rise to the top. It's different in almost every workshop. So I think partially it depends on the individual in the group.
Mm. You know what resonates the most with me?
Please.
The first thing you said about reducing your own ego, and that equals, it's not about you, and that equals listening. And for me, but yes, I would be curious to hear what everybody else thinks.
Yeah.
But
well, and if I can just double down on that for a second, I'm glad you sort of double clicked on that. I think that was one of the biggest transformations for me, was coming to peace with the fact, and accepting and realizing and really just maturing as a professional, that look, at the end of the day, they're not buying this software. They're not investing in us because of me. It's not about my smarts. It's not about my expertise. It's about them. And the more we can communicate and demonstrate that we understand them, we can empathize with them, and we have a solution that's unique and can help them achieve what they're trying to. And there's a feeling of, we like to use the word trust there. There's a feeling of trust and confidence there. That's what completely changes the game. And that's one of the things that completely changed the game for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it resonates for me because I think even though I am not in pre-sales, I have gone through a similar transition, and I think it's indeed very transformational
Yeah.
in the way you approach any profession, probably.
Really.
But,
Yeah.
I think I absolutely can see how it applies to sales.
Yeah.
But if we were to move forward, so we talked about the 6 habits, and I'm really curious how they withstand this new world. So the AI is entering, the demo automation is entering, new tech altogether. Are the 6 habits applicable one-to-one, or are there any adjustments?
Yeah. It's an interesting question, because I published the book in June of 2019. And less than a year later, the world shut down from COVID and changed forever. And over the period of the next 2 to 3 years, we went from 1 or 2 demo automation and tools for pre-sales to dozens. There's by some estimates, there's 50 to 75 tools out in the market for different aspects of demos and pre-sales. And what's interesting for me is it almost felt like within a year I had to rewrite. Within a year, my book almost felt like it certainly, I don't want to say became obsolete, but it certainly became outdated. Here's the interesting truth, though, at least from my vantage point. The habits are timeless. We do have to partner with sales. We do have to do discovery. We do have to prepare for meetings with efficiency and effectiveness in mind. We do have to practice. We do have to perform when given the opportunity. And we do have to continually seek to improve our craft. Habit number 6, to perfect. The reality is that automation just makes all those things a little easier, and we can be a little bit more efficient. I mean, let's take in habit number 3, I talk about the difference between demo content and the demo story. And the argument that I make is that we tend to focus too much on the demo content. And what do I mean by that? The views, the data, the pages, the configuration, the customization, all the things that we can build and assemble and show. And we lose sight of the narrative. Well, there are tools in the space that help customizing or make customizing and changing the look and the feel incredibly easy now, right? So we can actually do more in that regard in a more efficient manner. It still doesn't take away the fact that we need to focus more on the narrative anyway. You still need to have a narrative that is meaningful to the audience you're speaking to. Let's take Demo Boost. If I'm using Demo Boost, for example, it's not likely that I, as a sales engineer, am giving too many demos to people that are now seeing the product for the very first time. Chances are good that they've seen a demo or two. And so I can sort of use that to my advantage, not waste time on certain things that don't need to any attention, and really get into the heart of the unique capabilities that align with what they're trying to do. So at the end of the day, I think automation helps us as sales engineers just become more efficient and more effective in the context of the 6 habits that I wrote about.
That's perfect. And so if I was to specifically dive into the concept of having more demos, right? Because this is what many of those demo automation tools help us do. We can be seeding different messaging across the sales process. And you were talking about crafting the narrative. So what's the link there? How could demo automation or is there a specific skill needed to craft the narrative right now with those multiple demos? Is that a new way of doing things, or how would the pre-sales apply that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and just to repeat, I think where you're going, I think that the question you're asking is, how does the fact that maybe organizations may be creating multiple demo snippets or demo assets that can be consumed in an asynchronous manner, how does that potentially change the narrative or how we might go about crafting a narrative? I mean, is that in essence?
Yeah, I think, and specifically in terms of skills, right? Because is that completely new way of doing things from your perspective, or was that actually something that pre-sales had in mind previously, and it's just right now done in an automated way, or is that really something a new way of thinking about how to tell the story?
Yeah. What comes to mind for me is I do think there's a new skill set. And it's not entirely unlike when we had to learn to do most of what we do through the lens of a camera, as I like to say, right? Like and look, many of us have done Zoom meetings, or I think I had a GoToMeeting account back in, the early 2000, like 2005, 2006, something like that, right? But when we went from doing the majority of our work in a room in person to through a Zoom meeting, we had to develop some new skills. Now, many sales engineers are being asked to do demos literally in front of a camera without an audience. I think that's a different skill set. Rather than speak, like right now, you and I are communicating. I can see you. Your head is nodding. You're acknowledging. I can, see facial expressions and read a little bit of body language, which gives me the ability to sort of play off of that and feed off of that. If I was doing something like this and you weren't on the other side, it changes the approach. It changes the energy level. It changes literally the script and the narrative. I think we have to work that much harder. In fact, I think we have to spend more time preparing and more time practicing. And if I can use the term, more time perfecting those videos, because the impact that those videos have, the potential to have, is astronomical. Why? If I'm giving a demonstration to a client, this in essence is sort of a one-to-one experience. Even if there's 10 people in the room, it's sort of a one-to-one experience, and it can be customized specifically to them. If I'm creating an asset, it's going to be a one-to-many asset, so it needs to be generic enough to address different individual or different organizations, in different industries, but it has to be relevant enough that it's compelling and engaging. So yeah, I think it changes the conversation a great deal. It's the reality is I think we need to think a little bit more like marketing professionals, right? I think, I've said for years that one of the biggest difference between marketing and sales is marketing is putting together material to be consumed by people who they may never meet, whereas sales is putting together material that's going to be consumed by individuals that they're going to be face to face with, right, or camera to camera with. So yeah, I think it's very different. The only thought that I have or final thought that I have. I record a lot of video training myself. I find that much more difficult than just having a conversation with someone like yourself. It's just a different skill set.
So true. So true. And I personally, obviously, my background is in marketing. So ever since I started really deeply investigating the world of sales and pre-sales, I have been very inspired by how much both sides can learn from one another. And everything you just said resonates so much, because I definitely have learned a lot from the sales perspective. And I think marketeers have also a lot to contribute to the sales world.
100%.
I will definitely hold this thought and work deeper on that. But something that I wanted to investigate further is this balance of technical skills and the soft skills you talked about.
Yeah.
And again, let's bring it to the world of automation, of new tech. And you already mentioned that the work is actually harder because it's a way more difficult to be empathetic with the community, with a person, with a buyer that you don't know. How to balance the soft skills and technical skills in the era of new tech?
Yeah. To be fair, it's a question that I'm probably asking myself on the regular, and where is that fine line? And look, my background is tech. I mean, once upon a time, I was a software developer, and so I still get fascinated with the tech. And you use the word balance, which I absolutely love. There's a term that I've heard quite a few times and use a lot myself now, which is, I think sometimes it's easy to over rotate one direction or another. And I think in the world of technology, and particularly with now with AI, with all the automation, I think, and I know I've even made this mistake probably in the past, 12 or 18 months. We get so excited about new technology, whether it's AI or what have you. I think it's tempting, if not easy, to sort of over rotate a little bit and try to get too deep into technology or have it do too much for us. On the flip side, we can't ignore it. We can't not use it. Plain and simple, I believe that sales professionals and or sales engineers and or marketers and or any other role not using AI will be outmaneuvered and beaten, if not ultimately replaced, by marketers and sales professionals and sales engineers who are using AI and automation and technology, right? But we can't do so to the extent that we forget about the importance of communication, of building rapport, of demonstrating empathy. At the end of the day, people buy from people. I believe that to my soul, and I will believe that as long as I'm in this profession. People buy from people, and people want to work with people. People want to feel like there's a human element in the role. But if we're not taking advantage of AI and technology, and again, in your case, demo automation, if we're not taking advantage of giving people the opportunity to introduce themselves to our capabilities and sort of, quote, take a taste of what's on the menu on their own time, so to speak, we're going to miss the boat. So hopefully, and actually there was one other thought that I had as you were asking that question. And this ties probably a little bit to the idea that we shared earlier about this idea of ego, and it's not all about me. I think there's got to be a touch of self-awareness there, right? And am I over rotating too far into technology, or am I, if I can use the term, under rotating and maybe resisting it for whatever reason that I'm resisting it? So I think a touch of self-awareness on this idea of maintaining this balance goes a long way also.
It definitely resonates. everything you said, and I think all those concepts are a way broader than just sales. I think or pre-sales. Personally, I am definitely getting inspired myself as well, even though I'm not in a pre-sales role. So definitely a few other concepts that I will take with me and will work on a little bit more. But the last question. So you have developed a Six Habits training course recently.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how our listeners can access the training?
Yeah, of course, of course. So, and you're 100% right. So we've done a couple things, and again, I published the book in 2019. I launched, and you mentioned Demo Doctor. That actually takes me back a little bit. So I originally launched the business Demo Doctor in, actually, believe it or not, in March of 2020. So at the time, I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Survived 2020. Really, things really took off in 2021. We've been through a few evolutions now. It's now, and I think you know my business partner, Kerry Sokolsky. He and I joined forces, and we now run the business under the name Tech Sales Mastery. And people can go to techsalesmastery.com, spelled exactly as it sounds. And yeah, I've been running workshops for organizations, and large organizations like SAP and Workday and HubSpot, and then countless other smaller organizations that are based on the Six Habits framework. And then we launched a Six Habits certification, professional certification, just about a year and a half ago now. And we have about 500 people who have enrolled in the Six Habits and earned their Six Habits certification. And we've had people who were not in the profession enter the. In fact, one of our members, she got her first job, and then this past year was named the #1 SE in her organization. That was a huge, sort of celebration for us and for her. We've had people who are in their first role in pre-sales. We have people who have been doing it for 10 years, but just wanted to sort of level up their game. So, and we have a number of managers who are involved as well. So it's a program. If anybody, who may be listening to this, if you haven't read the book, I would say start there, because if you read the book and it doesn't resonate with you, then there's no point in considering attending one of our workshops or going through the certification. But if you read the book and it resonates with you, the training goes much deeper into each of the Six Habits. And then there's a certification, and then we have I think I mentioned the weekly mastermind. So it's really been a great experience for me. When I wrote the book, nobody knew me from Adam, and I'm not sure anybody does now, but at least a few people have paid a little bit of attention to what we're doing. And most important and most satisfying for us is we do feel like we've helped some people and some organizations in their progression. And that's really what this is all about for us.
That's great. Well, I definitely am inspired, and I definitely will be sending a few people your way. So thank you very much for sharing those insights. And for everybody who listened to this podcast, thank you for tuning in to today's episodes of Demo Boost Demolog. Stay inspired, keep mastering your demos, and we'll catch you on the next episode.